Cool. What's going on, everybody? Welcome. I'm so excited for this session, by the way. Yeah, I have a couple tips on this. So when I'm doing prep for a discovery call, one of the big things that I do that I think is a little bit different is I'm taking notes in the form of questions. So I'm thinking about what are the different triggers for the thing that I sell that I want to point out and have a conversation with the buyer about. And what I don't want to do is take notes where it's like, okay, they had an event, their customer event last month, and oh, this person was on a podcast recently where they talked about needing better data analytics, and I sell a data analytics tool. What I don't want to be doing is being in the heat of battle of that discovery call and trying to figure out, okay, they talked about data analytics. How am I going to turn that into a discovery question? I want to do all of that prep work up front. So I'm actually taking prep notes of the questions I'm going to ask them. I'm not going to get to every single question, but my idea here is I want to save cognitive brain power, which I have a limited amount of, for better stuff than those questions. So that's a really big one. The other thing that I think about is I really want to walk into that meeting knowing what's top of mind for that customer. And so what I'm going to do is I want to find recent LinkedIn posts that they made, a recent podcast that they were on. If I can find a YouTube clip that they did recently, my whole goal is to figure out like what's top of mind for this point and for this person and point that out. Hey, I listened to your webinar recording on the Sell Better webinar series, and I heard you say this. Even if it's like not totally related to my thing, I want to signal to them that I have done my homework because people will reciprocate that effort. The demonstration of, hey, I did my work, folks will say, all right, this person's trying, and they'll give you way, way more than if you go in and it's obvious you haven't done your work.
Charles, I know you had a great point about industry. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I love the do we have to do research option. That is fantastic. I love that. I love that. Yeah, so I'm going to say two things. Three things. One, I love Nick Cegelski, so he's got great insights. So thank you very much. I learn from Nick every single time I speak with him. The second thing I'll say is, we should all be, at the risk of stating the obvious, we should be paying attention to tracking and monitoring industry-focused research. So there is research on the company that we're about to have a conversation with, and there's research on the people that we're about to talk to, all very important. With that said, we should also be researching the industry, period, in general, in between calls. That's the type of research I'm talking about, the in-between research, similar to nurturing for prospects, but we're nurturing our minds for ourselves. And so signing up for, if it's private, I'm just giving a one industry as an example, if it's the private equity world or landscape, or if it's a sector that any of you are focused on, the healthcare sector, I'm going to look at news-specific journals and sources that only talk about healthcare or that only talk about private equity. Hopefully, if you're selling, hopefully you're liking what you're selling. And if you're liking what you're selling, you're going to like reading about what you're selling. And so definitely that is a very, very big part of research, because a lot of times you'll bring that up in a conversation with any company, with any prospect. Oh, I just saw this happen in the industry. I'm also not just in the know about you. I'm in the know about the industry. I'm in the know about your peers. I'm in the know about companies in your portfolio. I'm in the know about the industry. That's a big part of the research that is important for us as account executives. And the second thing I wanted to add with regard to prep is, you know what? I think I may have put those two in one, because I totally am blanking out. Oh, here it comes. The second item is I've talked to Nick Cegelski about this. Research is important, okay? But it's important for us as AEs or SDRs not to overburden ourselves, because if we do too much and feel like we have to show credibility, then we end up talking more than we would have liked, or we just end up, trying to prove to our prospect we are credible and we know we're all knowing. Take it easy. This is an art as much as it is a science. Know enough to be dangerous. So don't overburden yourself. Place a lot of the burden on the prospects as well. That's what I have to say about research.
What we have next, we want to know the techniques you want to be asking the techniques you gotta really lean into, like the questions you got to be asking that lean into your solution. So tell me, Charles, what do you have around this? You got any like thoughts that come into this right away?
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. I want to point out a very subtle point, a very important point. We are not talking about leading questions. That's not what we're talking about. Leading questions are, I'm asking you this question knowing this prospect is going to answer it in the following way. That is totally self-serving. People catch on to that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about leading with questions that will prime a very thoughtful and effective conversation. So what does that mean in English? That means at the beginning of any conversation, it's always very important. We learn that context is king, okay, in sales. I think John Barrows talks a lot about that. So in the beginning of the conversation, we kind of want to know, like, where are we at? Where are we at? So let's assume, without getting into heavy granularity, me and Cegelski, hey, Nick, nice to connect, blah, 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 where you from, okay. I have us down till 2:30 is that, or to 3 o'clock is that time, till that time still work for you? Yeah, sure. And then I might say, by the way, Nick, just to make sure we're on the same page here, I was just curious to what extent you have familiarity with our organization. I'm not sure if you've done research or what you know, if you've spoken with us in the past, etc. Now, most prospects will either say, I don't have any familiarity, or no, I have some familiarity, but not enough. Tell me more. Like, rarely, almost never, someone gonna be like, yeah, I know everything about you guys. I mean, so why we talked, right? So, right. So then after I get some sense of like, where are they at? No, you can tell me a little bit. I don't really know everything about you guys. Then I might throw in and ask for permission. I love asking for permission. By the way, it's very inviting. It pulls people in and doesn't push people away. I might say, Nick, cool. So before we kick off the conversation here, would it be all right if I just give you some high level context around what we do and maybe a little context as to why I reached out to you? Yeah, sure. Great. And then I'm going to start with something called a positioning statement. A positioning statement lasts less than 30 seconds. And what it is I'm telling my prospect what we do in less than 30 seconds, but I'm not telling them what we do. I'm really telling them why people talk to us, right? So in sales, a lot of us get like stuck on, oh, we're a platform, we're a tool, we're a this. Like, no one cares what it's like, I'm a human being. Okay, like we'll get to that, right? They're very stuck on what we are, and they're very stuck on how we do things, right? And those two, oh, this is how we do. No one cares about how you do things or what you are without being interested in what problems people talk to you about. Oh, that's interesting. Then if I know that, like, oh, so what do you guys do? How do you do that? Right, that comes much later. So the positioning statement might sound like, great. So Nick, just to give you some quick context, what we do is really simple. I'll talk about CB Insights for a second. Our clients come to us really to talk about three main topics. One, getting better coverage in a certain industry, even if they're specialists in that area, because many times they can miss out on a relevant company that could have been really impactful for them. They talk to us a lot about that. A lot of our clients want to understand how they can better be more accurate. How they could be more accurate when it comes to data, because they find themselves spending a lot of time on data that actually wasn't accurate, which has incorrectly affected their strategy. And the third topic people like to talk about with us is just to understand what trends are happening within certain emerging technology that they had no idea about that could really be a benefit for their organization when it comes to inorganic growth. So those are some three topics that people want to talk to us about, which we help solve for. I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions on that, which I'm happy to answer. With that said, it seems that, now I'm in transitioning totally, it seems that you do this. My guess is that you track emerging technology companies, which is the reason why I had reached out to you in the first place. Based on my research, I saw you guys came up with a new product line or a new initiative. And my hypothesis was that A, this is something that you're doing already, correct me if I'm wrong. And B, to the extent that you are doing it, I'd love to understand how that works, how you think about it, and then we could take it from there if that works for you. So it's like my positioning statement, right? Immediately transitioning into talking about them, never saying a word about who we are, never saying a word about what we do. All I said was why people talk to us in the first place. And now my immediate question is focused on them, while I've already primed thoughtfully the conversation around hopefully our solution in order to avoid them telling me, oh, this is our company, we're 20 years old, and we've all experienced, all of us, and we all will continue to experience as AEs and SDRs, prospects who just talk about nothing for 15, 20 minutes. You're sitting on the phone like, what am I doing? It is our responsibility to prime the pump. So that's how I would start a conversation like that.
Now, I know one thing that has to be with intention is you also want to avoid certain questions. And I want to know from everyone in the audience, we have a poll for you guys here. Do you guys avoid any type of questions in your discovery? You know, do you just got fire away with no regard, or do you actually just be like, I don't want to ask, this could be touchy? I know we mentioned we want to be sure about that why word. Why is that? Nick, did you have something to touch on that?
Well, you're going to ask me, why is that? Yeah. So the word why is a double-edged sword. It can be your best friend in a sales conversation, and it can also be your worst enemy in a sales conversation. The word why asks the other person to defend their position on what that question is about. So if I say to Charles, why are you using a virtual background today? Well, now Charles has to justify why he's using a virtual background today, which there's nothing wrong with. I think your background looks really nice today, Charles. If I ask the customer about their current state, I say, why are you doing things like that today? They're telling me, oh, they have to defend that statement. So if anytime you're using the word why, you don't want to put the person on the defensive. The one time you want to have somebody defend something is when they're justifying why they're looking into your thing. So if they're telling me, oh, our systems, I was selling law firm time tracking software for a while. And if they told me, oh, the lawyers are frustrated and we're not efficient enough and things are really manual. And I say, well, why are you using the system? Well, now they're going to defend the choice to use that system in the first place. Well, the managing partner said we had to get this and he used it before. And well, now they're just justifying the reason that they bought that system that they had originally said they were trying to change in the first place. Well, that's not good. Instead, I want to say, well, gosh, usually when I talk to law firms and they're telling me about their time tracking software, sometimes lawyers are really wedded to that stuff, and making a change is a pretty big deal. I guess, why even have a conversation with a firm like ours about making this sort of change? That question, now they have to defend their reason for wanting to make a change. And when you get somebody to defend their reason for wanting to make a change, things often go in your way because now you understand their true motivations. So you got to be careful with why. You don't want them to defend the wrong thing.
Amazing insight, Nick. In terms of avoiding defending the wrong thing, what's interesting about the word why is a lesser known insight about the word why is why the word why can be a grand slam home run if you ask the prospect why they think that something is the case or why they feel that's the case. That's just a genius question. It can't go wrong. So I'm going to botch what Nick said, but if a prospect was like, yeah, we're working with all these systems and it's really inefficient and it's really, frustrating people and we're having a hard time with it. And I say, that's interesting. Why do you feel that's the case? Or that's interesting. Why do you think that's happening? That's it. And sometimes they'll be like, I don't know. You know,
Mm.
okay. You know what? Why do you feel that's even, by the way, even if you're having a conversation just about the industry that has nothing to do with them, they might want to talk to you about, oh yeah, we just saw this company come out with a product line, you know, where we're a fan, you know, where we that's something that we want to do, and I might be like, you know, why do you like their what, or this might be like, what do you like about their initiative? I might be like, why do you feel like that's something you've been falling behind on? You know, why do you feel or why do you think? And then finish that sentence is a slam dunk into the emotional heart of a conversation. So that's just to tag on to what Nick was saying. The other thing about, like, a lot of times people ask me like, Charles, what are some questions I would never ask? And this is my philosophy on questions. I don't believe there is such a thing as a bad question objectively in isolation. Okay. I do think there is such a thing as a bad way to ask a question. Because if you know how to ask questions in discovery, you can ask any question you want, and none of them will be bad. It's bad if the delivery is bad, right? If the way that Nick talked about why, right? Why is your background blurry, right? There's a way. That's a bad question, but he can ask it in a better way. And so there are always better ways to ask any questions that we want to ask. Part of the list that's on the slide is, you know, not asking. Sometimes AEs or SDRs will ask questions. This is a big, usually it's more of the newer folks. They ask questions that they don't understand the question. It's like,
Mhm.
it's a very high level question that some people ask here. CB Insights, you know, can you help me understand, Bob, what your deliverable is as a team? And I'm walking through a call, I'm having a session with an AE, and I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean, your deliverable? And the AE is like, I don't really know. So I'm like, why would you ask a question that you don't know what it means? Because then the prospect is going to do one of two things. They're going to say, well, what does that mean? And you're like, oh, crap, right? Or the prospect's not going to give you a good answer.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, cool, great. We accomplished nothing in the past 3 minutes. I'm going to move to the next one. Understand with the meaning of your question and always understand why you're asking it. Because if the prospect doesn't understand why, which they shouldn't, based on what we just talked about, giving reasons for questions, you know why you're asking it.